Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And as we are heading into party season, I thought that this would be a very good topic to explore. So today I've got Tabbin Almond with me, and we're going to explore the whole story of your book, Tabbin, when we met at the British Book Awards recently, your book, Bottling Up Trouble. So really talking about alcohol in the workplace, and you've got some real strong views as to, is it actually storing up issues for us, and should we be rethinking as HR professionals, our audience, how it is positioned? So welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself and also maybe explain a little bit about what inspired you to write the book?
Absolutely. Well, thank you first of all, Lucinda, for inviting me on. It's lovely to be here and to have an opportunity to talk to HR professionals through your podcast. So my name is Tabbin Almond. And as you said, I have written a book called Bottling Up Trouble, and the subtitle is How Alcohol is Harming Your Business and What You Can Do About It. So quick I'm not going to give you my whole story because it's long and a bit messy, but I got into difficulty with alcohol myself. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic or a functioning alcoholic, not least because I don't use the word alcoholic really, because it doesn't have any meaning. But I was certainly drinking more than was good for me, and it was messing with my head big time. It probably also caused some of my subsequent health problems, but it certainly was making me extremely unhappy. I tried various things and eventually got free from alcohol. So I have been alcohol free now for well over 7.5 years. And a couple of years in, I was persuaded by the person who I had got alcohol free through, which was Annie Grace. I'd got to know her quite well during the work I'd done with her to the course I'd done. And I did the training to become a alcohol freedom coach myself. Once I started working with people, the sort of people I was working with and still do work with were predominantly quite senior in business. They were, generally, C-suite or at least board level, quite heavy hitters, terrified that somebody might find out they had a problem with alcohol. And when we dug into how what their journey had been like and how things had progressed, it became obvious to me that I was far from the only person whose career had contributed to their drinking. I worked in advertising for all of my career until I became a coach. And, I started in the 1980s. Everybody knows advertising still is a very, very boozy world. And a lot of us, sort of loved the job because it allowed us to drink the whole time. And whether that's the reason we went into it, I don't know. But it certainly, nobody had to hold a gun to my head and say, go out to lunch and drink wine with this guy. Far from it. I thought it was great. But what it did do, with the benefit of hindsight, was contribute to my alcohol use disorder. Let's give it its proper name. And realizing that this was a really common pattern for senior people in particular, and that corporate cultures were actually contributing to people's problems in quite a big way, and that to the point that it was very difficult for people to say no, I don't want to drink. If I had said back in the day, actually, I'm not drinking at the moment, barring the excuse of being pregnant, I would have said, your job is to make sure your clients feel happy. Your job is to build relationships with these people. If you go all prissy on us and start being judgy about booze, that's not going to help the relationship. So go and do what you need to do. Now, nobody ever said that, because I was never saying, actually, I don't want to drink. But that is the reality for lots of people. And there are lots of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s now who have been drinking for a long time, where it has become a problem. But there's so much shame and stigma around having a problem with alcohol that they can't ask for help. They feel that to do so would make them look weak, unreliable, sort of flaky, can't be trusted. And so they struggle on alone. And there's no mechanism for people to say, do you know what, I could do with some help on this. So because they fear that if they say they've got a problem with alcohol, they will be kind of branded forevermore. And it's really perverse, because we're encouraged to drink, by society, but particularly in the workplace. And then if somebody gets into trouble with the stuff we are encouraged to drink, even though we all know it's highly addictive, then it's suddenly the individual's fault. And I just think that we need to change that culture. So
Gosh, yeah.
change,
There's a
yeah,
lot.
sorry.
There's a lot there, Tabbin, and
Yeah.
I'm almost not sure where to start in it. I suppose one of the things I'm going to ask you two questions in terms of, one is, do you think, I might be three, hang on. So, okay, so there's one question that springs to mind is it chicken or egg, which is kind of linked to the same thing, as in, do you think that certain personalities are attracted to certain industries which have more alcohol driven, and is it the person or the industry or the culture that's kind of triggering it? I'll stick to two questions. So there's something there that I was just intrigued by, and the second one, which is perhaps on to, is it still the same? I get the sense that boozy lunches of the 80s and 90s are not as common as they were then. So perhaps if we start with the sort of the cultural and the sort of some of that's about people's some certain personality. I mean, I see maybe high risk cases. You talked about senior people or sales people. I think back to sales conferences that I used to go to, that it was absolutely free bar, drink all night, and it was fine as long as you were present in the morning. But it was not acceptable not to be present, and things like that. So something there about the sort of the culture and what triggers it. And then perhaps let's move on to, has it improved? And if it hasn't improved enough, what we can do about it.
Yeah, I think in terms of personality types, there are plenty of people who work in a business where alcohol either is or used to be a part of the sort of fabric of how we do things, who don't get into difficulty. And it's less to do with personality type than people's sort of mental health background, if you like, where there has been a history of any trauma, any degree of trauma or unhappiness, where there are things, emotions that come up that people are sort of thinking, oh, that doesn't feel very nice, I'd like that emotion to go away. Those people are more likely to drink. Now, there is quite a bit of evidence that people who are naturally a bit more introverted may be more likely to turn to alcohol when they're expected to kind of, inverted commas, perform and be sort of a bit more outgoing, because they just feel a bit more uncomfortable than somebody who's a natural extrovert. It's something that a couple of researchers are working on at the moment, but it's not really. There's all sorts of theories about alcoholism, as people would refer to it, about it being genetic. really, there are some genetic markers, but it's certainly not cast in stone that somebody will become addicted to alcohol. A lot of things have to be at play for that to happen. But the biggest one is this sort of history of unhappiness and trying to evade the emotions that come up, or to kind of numb them. As far as whether things have changed or not, yes, they have, in that sort of Gen Z are tending to drink a lot less than previous generations, and they're much, much more aware of their mental health and much more proactive in looking after their mental health. And they have, not all of them obviously, but there is a much better understanding amongst the young about the fact that alcohol can never relieve depression or stress or anxiety, can only ever make them worse. And that's a biological truth. And it's, for those of us who are a bit older and who got quite fond of booze, that's a very inconvenient truth, but that is the biochemical reality of what happens when we drink alcohol. So the younger ones are much less likely to be drinking. That doesn't mean that every single person under the age of 24 is not drinking. Some of them are, and some of them will get into difficulty. But it's much less prevalent. What it does mean, though, is that as those people kind of get promoted at work and take on more senior roles, they will naturally change the culture of organisations, because they'll say, I don't want to have that sort of drunken Christmas party. None of us want that. Let's do something different. But at the moment, they are still the minority. There is also a potential ticking time bomb in a lot of them who aren't drinking are taking a lot of drugs. And
so it's just gone somewhere else. It's this
yeah
displaced issue.
And that's actually even harder to get people to talk about than alcohol, because not only is it taboo, but it's also illegal. So, a lot of them will be very, very quiet about that, but we do know it's happening. But that doesn't, the fact that the climate is changing. The other thing that's changing, which is hugely wonderful, is that there are so many more really, really tasty alcohol-free alternatives that people can have instead. And what we're starting to see, would love to see it much more, is that things like going for a drink all together on a Thursday night or whatever, or the annual party, there is a much better range of alcohol-free options than there were. But there are still plenty of kind of industry dues, receptions, where you turn up as a non-drinker and your choice is orange juice or tap water. And that just is not good enough. So there's a lot of room still to go. And of course, there are people who are a bit older, who've been in the workplace quite a long time, who are already in difficulty, but they're not sort of putting their hand up because they can't.
So let's talk about this sort of. Let's talk about it from an individual level, and then let's talk about it from an organisational level. Because obviously you are a coach and you have people coming to you with difficulty. So if someone's listening to this and they identify with what you're saying there, what would you recommend to an individual who has been in that culture and therefore has bottled up, 20, 30 years of, excessive drinking, using it as a crutch? How would you help someone like that?
Yeah, well, I coach a lot of people. I mean, everybody I coach is in that situation. The first thing I say to people, which actually is like, oh, that's such a relief, is it's not your fault. And unfortunately, AA is the kind of the thing that people know about. It's kind of what most of us grow up hearing. Oh, if you're an alcoholic, you have to go to AA and you have to do 90 meetings in 90 days, etc. And you have to stand up and say, hello, my name's Tabbin, I'm an alcoholic.
That's a commitment. 90 meetings in 90 days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big thing. But AA's not a bad thing. It's helped and saved lots and lots of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people have a problem with identifying as an alcoholic, a lot of people, like I did, find that when they go to meetings, they're sort of like, oh, I haven't had that spectacular rock bottom. I just know this isn't doing me any good. But there is a sort of culture of kind of sharing how gory your rock bottom moment was, which a lot of people think, oh God, I'm not sure I'm in the right place. They also refer to this as a defect of character, and that I simply don't buy into, because I mean, it's not, it's just you happen to have fallen foul of an addictive substance which you've been encouraged to drink. That's not a defect of character, that's just bad luck, really. And it's possible to turn it round and to do so and go on and live a really happy, really joyful, fulfilled, purposeful life without all the sort of beating yourself up that goes with being in difficulty with alcohol. And it doesn't take very long. Most people I coach will be alcohol free within about 12 sessions, and up and running. Now we might have the odd sort of check-in afterwards, but really that's, for most people, that's all it takes. I have to say, I'm talking about people who are not at the stage where they would be having sort of really severe withdrawal symptoms. There is a very small minority, probably about 5%, who need to have a medical detox, and that will take a little bit longer to work with somebody like that. But everybody, with the right support and learning not to beat themselves up and to kind of cultivate self-compassion, can turn it round. And that's what the coaching is about, showing people how they can kind of regain control and sort of empower themselves in this. And mostly I coach one-on-one. I do run group programs as well. And when people contact me for a discovery call, I will talk them through the options, which include other people or other ways, not just saying, it's my way or no way. There are lots of options there, but people can find it confusing. So I just offer people free discovery calls, and they can kind of find out more about what their options are.
Because that's one of the things about an individual of it. And I think, again, people who've been drinking heavily for that amount of time, is the whole sense that they might think that they don't want to stop because it's such a crutch, if you see what I mean. So they might put off having coaching. I think a bit like the Alan Carr give up smoking tactic. It's almost like people think they don't want to, I suppose. So do you have to deal with that first in terms of the motivation, or are people motivated to stop at that point?
Well, no, but I never sort of, in AA they do this thing of staging interventions where they'll sort of, your family will ambush mum and say, Mum, you've got to stop drinking, we're carting you off to the Priory or whatever. Don't do that at all. The person has to be ready. Now, what generally happens is that people say, I just want to cut down. I know I'm drinking too much and I want to cut down. Now, cutting down is better than staying where you are. But what tends to happen, by the time we've worked with the beliefs that people have about alcohol and kind of shone a spotlight on them and help people to see, actually, that belief is just a belief, it's not a truth. And we can reframe it. So it's a bit of neuroplasticity, rewiring the subconscious. By the time we've done that, the vast majority of people will say, I could drink, but actually I don't want to, which is very different from that white knuckle, I mustn't. One or two do say, I'd like to moderate. Usually they're coming back 6, 9, 12 months later and saying, yeah, that moderation didn't work out quite so well. Can we have another go? Because once you've really interrogated whether alcohol is able to do the job you're giving it to do, you say, oh yeah, that's not going to work out so well, is it? And so people, but it's about losing the desire to drink rather than exercising willpower, if that makes sense.
Okay. So that's helpful if you're working with people on a one-to-one. If we then go back into in an organisation, we're hitting Christmas party season, which is a traditional time where people, often at the business might almost encourage people to drink more and those sort of things. What would you say as leaders or HR professionals in an organisation we should do?
Okay, well, at this stage, we're recording this in mid-November. So at this stage, Christmas parties will be organised. So for this year, you can't really change the format of the party at this stage because the party is probably happening within the next 4 to 6 weeks. So what I would say to anybody who's got any influence over a party is think about how you are going to look after people who don't want to drink and who feel uncomfortable around people who are getting very drunk. So that means making sure there is a really good range of alcohol-free options. I would suggest that the best thing to do is to limit the amount of alcohol, but make all alcohol-free options freely available. So lots of times people do things like, everybody gets a ticket or a voucher and they can swap that for an alcoholic drink or whatever. Very often though, what happens is some of the non-drinkers will give their ticket to the drinker. So actually somebody can very easily have 5 to 10 alcoholic drinks. And there is that prevailing attitude of, I'm going to get my money's worth out of the boss kind of thing. So I think culturally, that's not a great start point. Leaders need to lead on this. They should definitely not be encouraging drunkenness. They should definitely not say, oh, go on, have another one and all that sort of stuff. That's what used to happen, but it really isn't appropriate. And there is an inclusivity thing here as well. There are lots of people who, for whatever reason, do not want to drink and are made to feel really uncomfortable by bosses who are encouraging it. So that's a complete no-no. The sort of, come on, let your hair down, have another one sort of thing is completely sort of wrong in my book. But making people pay for alcohol or just having one free alcoholic drink as somebody walks in, but not on a ticket system, which can get abused, just like the single drink. Yeah, and that's it. And then people pay. They're perfectly used to paying. They pay everywhere else. So, but all non-alcoholic drinks free. I think also in an ideal world, and I appreciate that for many parties they're arranged, you can't change it for now, but having a do where alcohol is pretty much center stage is asking for trouble. You will know, people in HR don't need to be told about the day after the Christmas party. It's so common for there to be, HR incidents at a party of inappropriate behaviour.
Quite often by the leadership assault as well, as I
Absolutely.
recall.
Yeah. Sexual assaults happen at Christmas parties. People do not behave well when they're drunk. And being drunk is not an excuse in the eyes of the law. So if somebody is assaulted by somebody at or after a Christmas party, just saying, oh, I'm sorry, I was really drunk, is not going to get them off. Assault's assault. Unwanted advances from a boss will be remembered. Now, people may feel too intimidated to report that to HR, but it's still not right. And the world that I come from, advertising, there is actually an organisation called Time 2, which is about stamping out sexual harassment in the advertising industry. And the incidents of sexual harassment are virtually all when people have been drinking. People say, oh, it's great to have a couple of drinks, you lose your inhibitions. You also lose your judgment. And as employers, we have a duty of care to people. That means not just making sure that the dinner is, not being poisoned or anything, and there's good quality food and all that sort of stuff. But it's also making sure that people are safe at the event and can get home safely as well. So some of the good practice is bringing events earlier in the day, combining them with a kind of, this is how we've done this year, thank you very much, maybe some funny speeches, all that sort of stuff. But you don't need to start drinking the minute you arrive if something starts at 3 in the afternoon. Then there can be, involving some games or some fun or some, team building exercises, all that sort of stuff. It's just taking the spotlight off. We're all here to get drunk. So there are lots of things that can be done even within the context of this party's kind of already arranged. Biggest one though is making sure there's plenty of really good quality non-alcoholic stuff freely available.
And that is something that could be done now. If that's say, if it was,
Absolutely.
that could be, and making it look really attractive. And I think your point about having something else, it not being the centre. So going to a pub or a bar or things, and basically there's drinks, and you've got to just kind of make conversation. I think that is what generates the drinking, because it's pressure. You talked earlier about some personality types find even more pressure if you're more introverted to make that conversation. But even if you're an extrovert, it kind of makes it flow. If you feel that way, but having something else to do, like a team building, and again, I think the younger generation are better at this in terms of go to a ping pong table, where there's an activity that you can be doing and chatting at the same time, that sort of takes that focus off the drinking. Those sort of things can be really helpful, can't they?
Really helpful. Yeah, there's a I haven't been to it yet, but I really want to. On Tottenham Court Road, there's a life-size Monopoly. So you can go along as a group of people and you can play Monopoly, but it's kind of for real. You're walking around the board and stuff. And I think something like that, it's novel, it's different. You do it as a team, because one of the things about parties is they generate stories and memories. But at the moment, they tend to be stories of people's drunkenness and, oh my God, did you see her? And that's not the story we want, and the memory we want people to have. And they're also unkind, because there's always somebody who is oh yeah, they really, really made a fool of themselves, didn't they? And that's not the kind story. Yeah.
Yes, no, exactly. And it's not how you want to be remembered at work the following day. So in terms of your workplace culture, one of the things in your book, you talk about a no buts roadmap in terms of this. Would you talk us through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite a complicated process, but there are a number of elements. One of the important things is for the leadership team to buy into the fact that there may be a better way of doing things. And that can be really difficult, because most adults in this country drink alcohol. So what we're not saying is you're wrong for drinking, because I think one of the things with leaders is that they feel that for them to even raise the subject of alcohol in the workplace is being hypocritical, because they themselves drink. And the more senior they are, the more likely they are to drink. Not necessarily problematically, although some of them do. So one of the things that I suggest is that we just kind of run an audit of the various ways that alcohol kind of shows up in the workplace culture, and just see what's going on in that organisation. And I have a bottling up trouble assessment tool. So anybody who goes to my website, you can do this for free, and it just comes back and says, how at risk you are as an organisation, and what the things are that you could change really quite quickly and easily to just improve the situation. So one of the things at this time of year, we've talked about parties, but one of the other sort of features of Christmas is corporate gifting, giving clients a Christmas present. Nearly always that's alcohol.
Yeah.
So just
it is slightly less, those sort of things are slightly more frowned on now, I think, more culturally as well, because there are there's greater awareness that there are people who, for religious reasons, don't drink. So it's maybe not an appropriate gift. So I do see more awareness of those sort of things.
Yeah, but I would argue that it's arguably never an appropriate gift, because you don't know where somebody is. And there's somebody I know who worked in advertising, who there was a little sort of internal competition which he won, and his prize was a case of Chablis, which arrived just before Christmas. He was in AA at the time, and it totally derailed him. Having a case of a wine that he really liked in his house all through Christmas and New Year was too much, and he drank it, and he was straight back to where he was. So we never know where somebody is. And so I would argue that giving somebody booze is just not a great present. Now, for me personally, having got into the mess I did with booze, I kind of see it as a form of poison. So, somebody says, would you like a nice bottle of wine? I hear, would you like a nice bottle of poison? No, thank you. But it is actually not good for anybody. It's not a health drink. It could lead to them bottling up trouble. So I think that corporate gifting is definitely an area, and also the role that we kind of say, oh, champagne has done a brilliant marketing job over decades and is utterly associated with celebration. But there isn't any sort of causation there. It's just an association. So working to sort of break that down, celebrate a different way. And certainly when I heard recently, I think I mentioned it in the book, somebody who was sent a bottle of champagne by their employer on the birth of their baby, a woman who was breastfeeding, and sent a bottle of it. It's just nuts. I mean, so a lot of it's actually quite thoughtless. It's just, let's send them a bottle of champagne. Have a look. Yeah, next. And just thinking a little bit more.
So Tabbin, what would you say are good corporate gifts?
I think that corporate gifts that reflect the fact that you have got to know the person as an individual are really good. So gifting somebody, I heard the other day a lovely one where an account director in an advertising agency knows that their client is very into fitness, and so gifted them 6 sessions at Barry's boot camp. Really good gift for that person. They're buying them anyway. That's a really thoughtful gift that shows that they know them. And then the account director joined the client at some of those early morning sessions, and then they went and had breakfast afterwards. That sort of thing. Sending somebody, get signs that you actually know them and you're treating them as an individual. Because we don't, the sort of, flowers for people who love flowers. I do. You can see some behind me. I've always got flowers in my office. Flowers for me are always going to be welcome. If somebody's a keen gardener, buy them a bare root rose or something. But it's getting to know the individual and using gifts to say, I value you. I really like having you in my life, or we really like having you in our life. Here's something to sort of build our relationship rather than just everybody's got the same thing. Having said that, chocolates are always going to be welcome in this house. But
that's the thing. You can't always personalize everything. If you're buying something for a whole organization, you can't choose and individualize things. But flowers or chocolates
flowers. What you can do is sort of say to the organization, can say, okay, we're going to spend up to £30 per person. These are the options, and then ask the people who know them best to say what would they prefer. What do you think they'd like best? So it could be, some lovely, products from a skincare range. Give people an option, a little pamper pack or fruit, or if they've got young children, it might be a day at Legoland or whatever. Here are some options. Which one do you think that they would know? You know them best. Which would appeal to them most?
I think it's a good message all around, getting everybody thinking as what we can do, as opposed to being the lazy option.
Yeah.
So I guess obviously people can read your book, and I'll get you to tell us about your website and your podcast as well, Tabbin, in wrap up. But if there's one message you want our listeners to take away from this, or to take away from your book, what would you say it is?
Think before automatically using alcohol to help people to bond at work. I think that's
be a bit more creative.
Be more creative and just think, oh, wait a minute, how's this going to play out? And isn't there something better we could do? Because alcohol is causing problems for people in their personal lives, and they don't feel safe asking for help. The long term, there's lots in the book where I talk about how can we create that climate of sort of psychological safety, but that's a longer burn, more of a sort of slow culture change thing. It's not going to happen overnight. But what we can do is stop pushing alcohol on every occasion.
Okay. So an interesting conversation. I think we could continue the conversation indefinitely, Tabbin. It definitely is fascinating and endemic and thought-provoking. If people want to get hold of you personally, read your book, listen to your podcast, do you want to just share some of those? We'll obviously put the links in the show notes as well for people.
Yeah, sure. My business is called Wine to Water Coaching. So I've basically taken the Bible story of Jesus turning the water into wine and turned it the other way around, because for me that was the real miracle, turning the wine into water. So it's called Wine to Water Coaching, and that's all spelled out, no letters, no numbers, wine to watercoaching.com. Now on my website, I talk there about, I've got an area that's sort of for one-on-one, for coaching privately, and then a separate area which is sort of more corporate and for employers. Both of them will talk about the book, which is called Bottling Up Trouble. And if somebody just goes to bottlinguptrouble.com, they can take the assessment there, which will give them insight into what could be holding them back as a business. Because we know that alcohol is costing businesses. So if they can make these changes, it'll be to the benefit of their bottom line, basically. So so they can do the Bottling Up Trouble assessment, which is just bottlinguptrouble.com. That takes them to the area of the Wine to Water website, which takes them straight into that assessment tool. And then the podcast is called The Alcohol Debate. It's not preaching thou shalt not drink. It's just exploring myths and realities about drinking, but also quite a focus on the workplace, with a mix of some inspiring stories of people who've been able to turn things around for themselves. So it's not a preaching thing at all. I'm never going to say to people you shouldn't drink, but I do encourage people to think about why they're drinking and whether it's doing them any good.
Thank you very much, Tabbin.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Loads of places to go and look, and I shall go and look at some of these myself as well. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's been really great to chat.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.
This episode was brought to you by Disruptive Media, helping bold entrepreneurs stand out through podcasting, video, and social content. Visit disruptivemedia.co.uk to learn more.